Hey, Chris. Hello, 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 man. I was just introducing the situation here, but now I'm ready to have you on and have a nice little talk, like one of those talks that we had never had before. He comes.
I think we're connected.
Chris.
Yeah, looks
Yeah,
good.
my friend. Hello.
How you doing, man? Did you hear
Very
me okay?
good. Yeah, I'm very good actually. I was
Good.
just saying that, like I was reading these Leonard Cohen poems today, and I was thinking back of his life and of that period where basically he spent some years in this retreat in California, I think it was,
Up in the hills. Yeah.
up in the hills. And we're
Yeah.
thinking, man, I hadn't seen anybody in almost 4 weeks now. So like it's like the most convenient and cheaper way to have a nice retreat here.
Yeah, it has its advantages. I mean, I I think face-to-face conversation, with somebody I know, I had one in the last 2 weeks. It's crazy.
Yeah, unprecedented, absolutely. Great. So it's really good to have you on board. So let's have a little bit of an introduction here, so we can manage to talk about anything that comes about. So I
Okay.
started this project some 3 weeks ago. This is actually the third week, full of
Okay.
guests, and because I realized from the beginning that like our role as a cultural promoter and artists and musicians and whatsoever is to share a message of humanity first, then beauty, because I was seeing all of this number of live streams from like the theaters and from artists and stuff, and I was seeing it like a sort of like end-to-end sort of relationship rather than like an exchange, because you have, I don't know, your instrument and you play. By the way, man, that Willie Nelson song that you played really drove me to tears almost. So
Well, thank you.
that's how sensitive I am these days. so so like my idea was to basically collect all of these amazing contacts and people and friends that I've had the honor to meet in these past 5 years of crazy rock and roll, when ever since I jumped in, promoting my very first gigs here in Trieste and trying to connect the city with the nearby Balkan region and the whole world, basically, and basically have this series of nice chat about music, their career, their life, because I think that it's important. People can jump on board, shoot questions, and listen to our little conversation here. And I think that it could be an interesting and inspiring way, to fill your mind on this unprecedented period, basically. So our story, I remember our story started. Maybe you don't remember this, but maybe like not by talking, maybe you something will come up. Our story started back in 2007. It was
So- Okay.
it was October. It was a Saturday. The day after, here in Trieste, we had this big regatta called Barcolana, and
Okay.
along with a number of good friends from different ages. Here you have quite a nice fan base. You and Steve and all of that scene there. We came to Vernica to see Steve Wynn playing with you and the Frictions while he
That's
was
right.
there recording his Crossing Dragon Bridge album. That's how actually we I remember there was this guy, they call him Garibaldi, Frank, if you're there, big up. And then basically, so he introduced us. He was like, oh, he's also a good rocker. And I was like, me, like in my early 20s, like, oh, nice to meet you. I'm Marco. And so that was the first time. And then I've been following like you, and then I dug deeper into your career and to the Walkabouts and all sorts of stuff. And then I managed to see you again. I think it was when you guys were opening for Madhani at Kinoshishka, I think in
Kinoshishka.
2010.
Yeah. The frictions. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Right.
Frictions. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it came like the last tour with Walkabouts Travels in Dustland. There
That's
was
land.
also
Yeah.
Kinoshishka. And then I saw you in Gorizia as a duo. Like before we met with Lovely Quincy's, you played this
Oh, yeah.
tour
Yeah.
Osteria.
When I played with Giga. Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
When we
with
were in
Giga.
Goritza. Yeah. Yeah.
And then also in Nova Gorica with Giga again, when I was there with I put up that Lovely Quincy's gig with
Right.
our friend Tadeo there, and then we met again. And then like the best memory I have, of course, was that one time when we actually like collaborated, and I have you guys on at this little theater here with Daniel. It was also nice in Trieste here. It was a nice way to connect and to do something all together. It was rather
Yeah, it
fun.
was really fun evening. I think that was the only time I ever played in Trieste. I think
Yeah,
it's the one time.
Yeah, so far, yes, but I think we'll do it like, like actually, like before jumping in, I had this idea. Since last Saturday, I had Antonio Gramentieri here as a guest. By the way, he says hi.
Oh, super.
And so, like, we were talking about, what kind of stamina we all have when this is gone, like to go back and on that stage and sweat, like not on the phone, but just,
Yeah,
sweat,
yeah, yeah. Like
being there together and feeling the vibe, like in person,
make some noise.
make some noise. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, like he said, so like basically like we were starting to organize a little festival here that is due to happen in September, but now it's going to be more likely in October/November,
Okay.
and it's going to be called the Trieste Music Week. And so like he said, of course I'm up for it 100%. And also today I talked with our mutual friend Fernando Saunders again. We had like an hour talking
Ah,
about
super.
everything, and he told me about like Marian Faithful having had the COVID and all sorts of stuff. And also, did you know that he produced like two or three of her records as well?
I
So
know
that,
he did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was intimately involved with her career. He played on so many great records, so many
yeah,
great records.
yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah,
got an incredible history. Also, not just as a bass player, but also as a producer.
yes. So
Yeah.
like he said, well, man, like since come on board as well. I told him, and he said, well, maybe I should come and play with some local musician. And so I was thinking maybe you should have you and Antonio and him and some other kids from here and do some interesting like
Sounds
combination and noise.
sounds really fun. I would love to play with him. I mean, he's really. I saw him a couple times with Lou. Always great.
Which tour was that?
I saw him late '80s. Must have been. Was it New York or was it the one before? I saw both of those.
Mistral, you mean?
Yeah, maybe he was on that one. And then I can't remember. Did he play with Lou Reed when Lou Reed played in Ljubljana the last time? There were two bass players.
Yes, I remember. I was there in
Was
2005, I think.
Fernando Saunders one of them?
I think so. Like we were
I think
talking.
he was because it was the one guy on upright,
Yes,
and yeah, and so I think it was Fernando Saunders. Yeah, of course it
I
was.
we need to ask him, but yes, I think he was because basically he played from like 1980 to with from the Blue Mask to a New Sensation to Mister and New York, and then they had a little bit of a hiatus before that Berlin reissue
Yeah,
tour
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah,
this
yeah. And
tour.
then they came back
Yeah,
together. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So like I don't know when should like but and there's so much to tell. Like basically I was checking out the body of work from the Walkabouts, and you guys managed to put out like it's incredible how much music you guys managed to produce and bring around.
We were busy. I think for us it was to a large extent. The first years that we were a band, we were all working other jobs. Like day jobs and things like that, and really, really struggling to make it work. And there was this like magical moment where we were not really making much money, but we were making enough money to live from it. This was around 1992, and then we just became insanely productive because that's all we had to do. We were like,
Ah,
fuck,
yeah,
this is crazy. We didn't realize, before we would, literally go to work. We would be at rehearsal maybe at 7, 8 o'clock at night, rehearse for 2 hours, drag our sorry asses back home, have a few drinks, go to bed, get up, go to work, and we did that for years. And I think was this like you said, I think when this corona solitary existence ends, we will explode with energy. And that's around 1993. I mean, we did. Somebody once asked me this trivia question, said, like, what's the band that put out the most records the quickest? And in the '60s they used to bands would put out 3 records in a year. It was possible, like 3 albums. But there was a 1 year period from early 1993 to early 1994 that we released 3 albums,
yeah.
actually. So not only were we recording them, but we were releasing them in that time. It was, we were
Insane.
very, very busy.
And when did the Sub Pop came about? I mean, like was it already that? I mean, what is the story there?
Well, Sub Pop, we did one record. So we started in 1984. Uh, we'd been knocking around for about 3 years, and it wasn't going really well. I mean, we had kind of a moment in Seattle where it sort of went okay, and then a lot of venues started to shut down, and it just was a bad, depressed time for the whole scene. But we were starting to think, okay, that's kind of it. And we said, okay, we've got some money left over for some of these gigs. Let's go into a studio. Let's make something like an album. But we weren't really thinking of releasing it. We were just thinking like give each other, each one of us would get a cassette. And that'd be kind of the end. That'd be like, you know, our graduation, like our diploma. Like, okay, you were in the Walkabouts for 3 or 4 years. Here, you get it. And we did that. We went into a small studio and did some recordings. And then a friend of ours leaked it to this guy that ran a record label. It wasn't Sub Pop. It was a label called Pop Llama. And they released one record for us. Finally, this guy called us up and said, yeah, I'd want to put this out. You know, this is pretty cool. And we're like, really? We thought we were just about ready to quit, actually. And he goes, no, stick around for another year. You know, you do some shows, we'll release the record. And then Sub Pop started, 1988, let's say, roughly. And actually, we knew those guys. They were friends. You know, we knew Jonathan Poneman he was a booking agent in town. He booked shows. He was a DJ on like the Radio Student, you know, the college radio. Bruce Pavitt was a journalist. He had written about the Walkabouts. And it was before, you know, that at that moment, this grunge thing really didn't exist. I mean, these bands existed, but they weren't calling it grunge. It was just, you know, kind of indie kind of bands from Seattle. That's what Sub Pop signed. And so we were, I think, the third, maybe fourth, let's say the fourth or fifth band they signed.
Nice.
I mean, it was just local music thing. But then, you know, the tsunami of grunge hit about a year later. And you know, what we were doing was like so radically different that in a way, the signing to Sub Pop made a lot of sense in 1988. In 89, it started to seem like, you know, we were sort of the odd fish, like the fish out of water. But it still was a good thing for us. You know, it got us to Europe in 1990. And that kind of changed our whole fortunes when we got over here and started to tour here.
I remember you telling the story about Mudhoney that I think it was at Eurosonic when you had a panel there, like those great beer panels where basically the audience. And there was this story about Mudhoney that basically after they toured, they played in Berlin, they became hugely successful back home because of that.
I mean, they were 200 or 300 person band, maybe more, even like 200 person band before they went off and played in Berlin. And then Sonic Youth picked them up as an opening act. And and they were great to us, you know, like 1990 on our first tour, we didn't really have this kind of relationship with the British press like Nirvana did and Mudhoney and those bands. But Mudhoney heard that we were touring Europe and they said, hey, come over to London, you can open for us. It was like 1,000 people, you know, in London in 1990. Wow. And we were like ecstatic, you know, it was that kind of scene, you know, it was a very small scene. As much as there was a lot of differences, let's say, sonically between some of the bands, everybody, for the most part, got along. It was such a small scene that it was really hard. It was kind of stupid to be competitive because it just wasn't, there just didn't seem to be enough opportunity to be competitive about, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, like that's actually like quite a local attitude here. You know, it's such a small city with a lot of bands, like zero basic infrastructure, and all these people making work together. I said, people, come on, let's I mean, sit and talk. You know.
Exactly. No, we did that naturally there because it was very, very isolated. You know, this is like a pre-internet world. You know, it was really a very isolated scene, and in a lot of ways, that isolation and that, let's say, not being in the hip town of the moment, ironically created this great group of bands that had time just to sit around and rehearse and not think about necessarily being popular, more thinking about how to make cool music. And the grand irony is that it became this international phenomenon of a scene, you know, without really trying too hard, actually.
Incredible. And how was the office at Sub Pop back then? I mean, I remember like you telling also the story about this accountant guy staying and locking himself up in the room.
Oh, the accountant, the accountant literally used to lock himself up in the office because the two owners would come and like bang the door down and insist on, you know, some cash transfers to some dubious situation. Yeah, no, they were constantly. Well, their motto still today is going out of business since 1988. That's actually their motto.
I need to find a T-shirt with that motto somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah, so like, and then life brought you in, like, I guess that, when did you actually, and then you ended up in Ljubljana. That's where that was where I want to go. But when did you first start thinking about moving there? I mean, like, was it something that was coming about, but from time to time, or was something abruptly?
No, I mean it was. I mean, I still remember when the first time we played there we played in Križanka. That was also funny because we weren't by any means a big enough band to play in Križanka, but the very thrifty and well planned promoter had Nick Cave there the next night.
Oh, so
But
2005, when was that?
1994.
Okay, yeah, well,
And the PA was already installed, so he's like, well, if I rent another venue, I'm gonna have to bring a PA in. So actually, I've got the PA in Križanka already set up. So this little band from Seattle will play in Križanka. We had like 300-400 people. It was fun. A lot of people came up from Croatia. Also, some Italians came to that show. I remember talking
yeah,
to
yeah.
them afterwards. Uh, I remember Carla and we left there to go down to a little bar in the center of town. Somebody, from the show said, hey, come down. And I remember walking around and just saying, yeah, I could live in this town. This is a nice place. But I mean, I basically ended up, I met my wife. That was 1998, I guess it was. Yeah, it was 1998. And on that tour, when her and I met, actually it was 99 when we met. That was the first time I thought about moving to Ljubljana. It really had nothing to do with anything but that to begin with. I mean, I was working a lot in Europe even then, not just with Walkabouts touring, but also as a record producer. I was doing a lot of stuff in Norway and other places for bands. So it was kind of a logical move from let's say I hate to call what I have a career, whatever I have, a business or just as a life thing. It made some sense
And
actually.
before that, you were based in Seattle all the time.
All the time, yeah. And for most of the '90s, I was flying back and forth between Europe and Seattle. Sometimes five or six
Wow,
times in a year.
nice. Wow,
So it was, yeah, it was nice, but it was also getting a little bit like
tiring.
exhausting.
Mm.
Not quite like uh, you know people that live in Australia or something like that. I remember talking to Mick Harvey once from the Bad Seeds and just saying, he's like, he said, I'm going back to Australia now for a period of time because I can't just be treating like Europe and Australia as like a commuter flight. He goes, it just doesn't, it doesn't work with the body very well.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, yeah. Well, all these jet lags and stuff, I can imagine.
Yeah, it just compounds itself, and yeah, it was. And you stop really having a home per se. You're just living out of your suitcase all the time. It was something I wanted to do, but I mean, I don't romanticize that part of it very much.
And so that was back in like around 2000, I guess, like 99, 2000.
I moved 2003 to Ljubljana.
Okay, so
Like
17 years ago, you must have seen a lot changing there. I mean, as far as you know, there's
it's
like,
changed a lot. Yeah, I mean, it really has changed a lot. I mean, it's I was a little bit shocked when I got there. I mean, I loved the town. I was really lucky. I really got some very good friends right away. But I was really shocked sort of how the music scene worked. I mean, or didn't work. It seemed really for a place as small as it was, it just seemed like there wasn't a lot of like conversation going on certainly between different scenes of musicians, and maybe just in general, maybe just a little bit too, well, I've got this little piece of real estate, I'm going to hold on to it. And I was used to a very different approach. I mean, I didn't really have that. I mean, I was treated very well. I mean, I can't say that I was mistreated. I more saw it as a competition there, but that's really morphed over the last years into something much better than that. I've
oh
really
yeah.
seen.
Also, thanks to the great job of our friends like Rocco Shear, Matias, those guys are doing an amazing job.
All of those people, there's a group of 10 12, let's say, people that have really been really pivotal to that
Yeah,
starting. Like when Rock started this Pinelena, his living room series. This was he started it in a very innocent way, and it became such a central thing to the whole Ljubljana experience. And then when Kino Šiška came, of course, that rewrote the book also quite a bit.
I guess that Matthias was telling me that the Mudhoney Friction show was one of the first, one of the very first big like acts opening the season back then.
That was in the first year. I think it was 1 year in. You know, they hadn't done a lot. I mean, they had this big, beautiful space, but they were still, you know, trying to convince international promoters to bring acts there. I mean, Ljubljana at that point had really fallen off, let's say, the radar. I mean, in that respect, when I first came to Ljubljana, there was a lot of international acts coming, and then there just seemed to hit this kind of dark period. I mean, certainly there were, you know, some promoters trying really hard to make it work, but it was not just working as well as it had.
And how was the experience with Steve Wynn there back in 2007? He came to record his album, Crossing the Bridge, that you produced, and that's to go back to the beginning when actually I first met you. And yeah, how was his impression of the city? And yeah, how was the story there?
I think Steve had a great time. I mean, Steve and I met. I knew who Steve was. I mean, I played Days of Wine and Roses on my college radio station when I was a college radio DJ. So, you know, Steve for me was like, even though we're exactly the same age, I mean, I always felt like Steve was sort of, I mean, it was really simple. Steve was already making cool records before I was even in a band, you know. So that was always for me, like, I looked at Steve like, wow, that guy's great. You know, I mean, I still do. I mean, I love Steve's music and I love Steve as a person too. But that thing in 2007, that was a 10-year story already. I met Steve finally in person in a hotel lobby in Thessaloniki, Greece. Came around the corner and there he was. You know, it's just like, fuck, man. And, you know, he knew who I was and I, of course, knew who he was. And it's one of those things like we had like 10 minutes to talk and it was like it's like we got 3 hours of information in, you know, just going back and forth. And the last thing we said was like, you know, man, we should do something together. That would be so much fun. And we kept in touch over email for like literally 10 years to get that session in Ljubljana to happen. And, you know, that's the way, I mean, it wasn't like I was going, oh man, this guy can't make up his mind, or he was saying, oh man, you know, Chris can't do it now. I wanted to do it. It was just like, we knew that the right time would come. We were very patient about it. And yeah, it was lovely. I mean, he came, he started to send me songs. I loved the songs. At that point, my studio was in my house. He was in our house every day. Yeah. He had a nice little apartment down by the river. We hung out a lot in the evenings also. It was just really, really a great time. I think he was there almost a month, basically.
Nice. Yeah.
It's really good.
And you guys managed to do an amazing job, really. That's one of my favorite records of his catalogs, I have to say. It's because
it's cool. It's a really well. That's nice to hear. It's a really cool record, and you know, we're back at now. It's 10 years more, and we're sort of back at the same place again. Now we're starting to go, man, it would be cool if we worked together again. So let's see. I mean, he's really busy, and I don't know if you've heard it, but the new Dream Syndicate record, which drops on Friday. I mean, this is an amazing album.
I haven't heard it yet, but there's like a 20-minute song or something there,
yeah,
right?
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of 20-minute songs. There's a lot of long songs, and it's a really, really super, super interesting record.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's my, I mean, both of the ones they've done since they came back are great, but this could even be the best of the three. It's really, really strong.
You know, like back in 2010, I think you were at that show at Mira here in Trieste. He played with Miracle 3.
In Trieste, I was not, but my wife, Onda, was there. I was out of town, actually, unfortunately.
So I had a conversation with the album, his album back then. I don't remember now the title was Static Transition was before. No, that one was with like Everything That Rises Must Resolve.
Yeah.
And basically I was talking to him about Dream Syndicate, and back then, so he had that album. It was like successfully touring with Linda and the band, Jason and the band. And so I was asking me, so what about the new Dream Syndicate album? I was like, oh man, you know, at this point of my life, I'm not sure. That's the past. You know, now I have this band. It's, you know, it's kicking. So, but I said, never forget that, as you said, in that one song that actually featured in Crossing Dragon Bridge, something like "Never Say Never," because you can never know. And now they have like maybe their best album ever. It's great.
I think it's great. You know, in his case, I think he always kept that idea in his pocket. he was there. I mean, we even talked about it when, because we had a lot of time to hang out in 2007. But I think he was always like, look, it can't be a nostalgia act. We're not going to do it that way. It'd only be if I could get a group of people together who wants to make new music. And, you know, that was his criteria, and he stuck with that criteria, and it worked out for him.
Nice, nice. Yeah, yeah, amazing. So now let's talk a little bit about your work as like the owner of a label, because we talk about Sub Pop, about touring, about life and everything, but then at one point you also decided to jump into this adventure with the Glitter Beat. How did that thing come about?
I was just thinking about Sub Pop. I said this actually. Jonathan Poneman was in Ljubljana last, I guess it was October 2009, with his wife, just visiting, and we got together and had the founder of Sub Pop. We got together and had coffee, and he said, "Well, it's really interesting you did a label." I said, "Yep, I learned everything about what to do right and what to do wrong from you."
Great.
And he laughed really hard. I mean, it's like, those guys always had a great sense of humor. That's also one great thing about them. Yeah, I mean, we started this label as, I mean, to make the long story short, I went to West Africa, to Mali, basically on a music discovery mission. Not that I was expecting to discover anything. They already discovered themselves a long time ago. I was just there to listen to music I didn't know that well.
And you already had an album with Dirt Music back then, or
no? This was before. This was 2006. Went down there in 2006 for 1 month. Traveled all through Mali and Burkina Faso, way deep into the desert. Saw this festival in the desert, this famous festival that's way out in the middle of nowhere. Went back 2 years later with Dirt Music. We got invited to go. We made an application. They invited us. We got some money to go down there. And after that, that sort of started to rewrite the book. I met this band, Tamakrist, there, a young band of Tuareg, sort of Tuareg rock musicians.
Yeah, I happen to have it here.
There it is. Yeah. That was the third record I did with them. And yeah, we started that. We first did a collaboration record with Dirt Music, and then I started to produce records there. And those records, I was myself and actually the owner of this label called Glitter House, Peter Weber, who's a good friend of mine. We were licensing these records to his label, to Glitter House. And after about the third or fourth of the ones we did in Mali, we felt like, you know, maybe within the Glitter House structure, there wasn't such enthusiasm for this music. It wasn't like anybody didn't like it. It just was, they weren't as enthusiastic about it as we were. So we said, let's start this little, let's say, imprint of Glitter House. We'll release 3 or 4 records a year. And that's how it started. But actually, the third record we did was the one you just showed us, Chatma. And this record went kind of ballistic. You know, sold, it was the biggest selling record on Glitter House that year. You know, or even had been for a couple of years. It just sold records. Like, nobody knows exactly why. And we became so busy that actually we sort of had to create our own structure. It was just no way that we could do this anymore within this, you know, Glitter House setup, because they had their own thing going and we were taking up a lot of space. And that was it. And I had to really make a choice. I never saw myself as being a record company owner or even, you know, necessarily working for a record company. But this was about a year in. And it was either like, well, we could phase this thing out already that we just started, or I would sort of have to step up and become co-owner and, let's say, label manager. And yeah, it took a lot of adjustment. It took a lot of time out of my music making abilities because I was just really super busy. But after a while, I found the balance again. I can do both. And we're still really excited about it. You know, the label has morphed into a lot of different things, but you know, we will have done our 100th release in September.
Whoa!
That'll be release number 100 in 7.5 years. So we're doing putting out a lot of music from all over the world, from Vietnam to Turkey to still from Mali, South America. We've got bands in London. We've got the $75 bill in Brooklyn. You know, it's really super international.
Nice. And it's also good that then you also can hook up with this musician and also like jump in and do like create other different projects from starting from the network, basically.
Exactly. I mean, it's, you know, even as a record company owner, I still bring this kind of thing I have as a record producer and as a musician also, of course. I mean, Dirt Music, this group I have with Hugo Race and Murat Ertel from Baba Zula, you know, we're on the label, and we're going to do a new record. Actually, we were going to start recording, Dirt Music was going to start recording in May in Istanbul, but because of Corona, now we canceled that.
Right. Yeah, of course. So how many production did this situation push back? You were saying, sorry, I missed you for a second.
I don't think a lot. Clearly, an international production like Dirt Music, where Hugo's flying in from Australia and I'm flying in from Ljubljana to Istanbul, this kind of stuff was frozen. But actually, it seems like we don't really have a huge disruption in terms of albums that were supposed to be, you know, let's say that were nearing completion and so on. Actually, we have most of the albums we do have the albums already for our autumn schedule. And then for the winter next year, you know, by summer, we're all keeping our fingers crossed that we're going to be able to, you know, actually be in rooms with people.
Yeah, exactly. That's the step one.
But you know, I mean, this is I love what we're doing now, and I think it's a good example of, you know, how to take a bad situation and make something positive out of it. I hope we don't all lose. I hope we don't all just fall back into our own little holes also. Yeah. That's also a danger, you know.
Talking about little holes, I really like the philosophy. I remember, I think you or some other guy that was talking about the fact that now there are like a pile of records like produced and distributed like every single like day, and it's on top of all of this history of like you know, like immense body of work from the time that the recording started, and maybe from the time that also sheet music started. And so like it was this point about how to you guys choose the band, and how, you know, I think the metaphor came up from you, but I might be mistaken, of the fact that like the band needs to find his own voice, or the artist needs to find his own voice and dig deeper into his whole and find it, and the authenticity and what's real and what's you know, what is there. Because actually I was having this conversation as well yesterday with Sarah Reiner. We were talking about creativity, and we were talking about the fact that, of course, we are not born tabula rasa. So of course, sure, whatever you write can sounds like something, because that's how we learn from imitation and stuff like that. So yeah, so how do you see it? How is your process? How do you, when do you feel this something is really worth like distributing and producing and taking care of?
I think it's where you started with what you were saying. You know, I think now it's, you know, I don't think that it has to, you know, that things have to be necessarily, you know, like blowing up. You know, there's still a place for great songs, for example. You know, songs are kind of a traditional, let's say a traditional way to deliver music. But, you know, if they're great, there's always room for something that's great. You know, that's for sure.
It's not like Dylan once said, there is not like, we don't need new songs or something. I think that he said something like that back in the days.
Yeah, we don't need new songs. We need new great songs.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I should put a t-shirt with that. We don't need, exactly. We need new great songs. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we don't need anything, but something that's great and really inspired and emotional and moves us in some ways, there's always room for that. The problem is that music has, like everything, you know, when there's so, you know, we have like 3 generations that exist side by side. You know, this was impossible to think of in the 1950s, that in the same way, like the pop music scene would be populated by 3 different generations. But we have 3 or 4 generations simultaneously making music. You know, we have musicians that are approaching 80 now that are doing stadium tours.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's so crowded that it's very difficult to get a individual voice. And like what Sarah was saying is absolutely right. You know, we are a culmination of all our influences, but I think it's just more that challenge to, you know, really go inside yourself and find that thing. And it doesn't have to be like only personal expression. It can be the place you're from. It can be that social moment you live in. You know, it can be a lot of things that inspiration comes from. But
Imagine how many great albums will come out of this situation
I think
here.
there'll be a lot. I think people are taking, you know, they have time again. We're moving so fast all the time, and it's good to have this. I think this moment of reflection is, you know, it's a tragic moment. Also, we can't forget that. You know,
Absolutely, man.
it's also an awful, very very undeniably awful moment for a lot of people. But
Of course.
uh, those of us that are you know, at least lucky enough not to have that right there, you know, I think we have to reflect on this moment, but not selfishly. We should reflect on this moment collectively, I think,
Right on. Yeah.
and really see where, you know, there's going to be a lot of disruptions now. You know, when things go back to normal, it's not going to be normal.
No, it's
And
going to be different. We need to reboot.
exactly, and we need to reboot, but we need to make sure that we're not letting the wrong people reboot it
Right.
for us.
Right.
You
That
know?
that's exactly the point of the intention of from like a cultural promoter, or you know, like people in the arts. You know, we need to make people more connected and feel like a positive vibe rather than focusing on the us versus them bullshit
Yes.
propaganda. You know.
Really, we need to do that. And I think, you know, like I said, I think in this region we started to do that. And actually, you're a big part of that. I mean, you're a constant presence here in Ljubljana, and that opens up Trieste for us. And you know, and then there's Zagreb, and there's Belgrade, and you know, I think for the first time, not the first time, but in
A long time for sure.
it's a slow burn that got us here. But let's make these bridges stronger and these bonds deeper. You know, I think it's
Yeah,
really an
amen.
opportunity
Yeah,
for us to do that.
yeah, absolutely, man. So like we are almost, we have another 15 minutes here. We are almost
Yeah.
running out of time. And so if people have any questions, they can, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to do so. If people are jumping in and don't know what's going on, this is a show that I started 3 weeks ago through the Instagram account. Here's a platform that me and a group of other amazing people started here in Trieste to promote our events and to promote culture and to connect Trieste and make it more international. That was the idea from the start. And this show goes online every day from 6:15 p.m. GMT +1. Tomorrow we have Peter Baros, also from Ljubljana, so we can hear also his side of
Super.
the Ljubljana scene. And
Yeah, he's a real also important. He's done a lot, and you know, he's a connector. He's somebody who's really connecting people, which I think is, you know,
yeah.
That's something we need.
So if we don't have any question here, I would like to ask you, what was your future project? I mean, for which project were you writing songs now?
I don't know.
I
think I started. It was even before this. Let's say the shutdown, but I started to write a solo record. I think.
Nice.
I mean, I'm just collecting songs to begin with. I've done 3 other solo records over the years, so I think it's time for that. I mean, we will do a new dirt music record in 2020. I mean, we'll record it for sure this year, but unfortunately, the plans got a little bit scuttled because of, you know, just the inability for us to get together into the same room. But we'll have that. But
with the same lineup as Beer Ruya.
yeah, it's exactly the same lineup. Yeah.
Nice.
We'll do that. We'll do that lineup. No, it's fun. I mean, this finally started the first time, probably except for the first record when Chris Brokaw was with us. It was like it started to feel like a band again. It was really a lot of fun. The shows were great, and we played a lot actually. We played in Germany and Czech Republic, Poland, you know, a number of places. There's someone said, "I would love to hear your record, Chris." Well,
wait and see.
No, that's very sweet. Yes, I will make it this year. I mean, I have about more than half the material now, and yeah, I've got
your quarantine book now. Vittorio from Sora down from Rome is asking your book of the quarantine, like you're currently reading.
Well, I'm normally reading like 5 books simultaneously. I'm one of those kind of readers. I'm finishing a book. I just finished W.G. Sebald's The Immigrants. He's this German guy who went to the UK in the early '60s and he taught German literature in a UK university, and writes amazing books. I mean, he's deceased now. Um, I think that's the last one of his. I think he has 5 novels, and I've read them all now. And
Nice.
that Nick Cave song, "Rings of Saturn," this is named after one of his books, for example. Writes something bordering like novels and memoir combination. And I was reading another memoir, and I can't remember the name of it now, but it's by a British writer. She goes and lives in Montana, and she's reflecting on, I think, the American experience from this outsider's viewpoint. Quite a good book, also. And what else did I've got 3 or 4, sitting around. I'm always
Nice.
reading.
Nice. Did you rediscover some classics in this time of retreat? Like,
I
talking
started.
about.
I did start to actually when Dylan dropped this song. I went back and read some of a book I really I consider it a modern classic. It was written in the '80s by this American writer Don DeLillo. It's called Libra, and it's
Oh
about
yeah.
the Kennedy assassination,
Nice.
written from a novelistic point of view. And that book had always been huge with me, and it was fun to go back. Well, I wouldn't call it a fun book, but it was exciting to go back and read it again, especially in light of the Dylan song, which is almost a novel in itself, actually.
It is. And about music-wise?
Music, what did I listen to? I've been listening to a lot of jazz this last couple weeks. Pharoah Sanders, more this kind of spiritual jazz scene from the '70s. Okay, he even goes back to the '60s. Don Cherry, who I love very much. Yeah, Miles, the more electric Miles period.
They told me there is a super nice like documentary on Netflix about his life.
I need to see that, because I think it's about the making of Bitches Brew, which would be
Yeah.
great, because that's exactly the period that I'm sort of listening in. I mean, I
Nice.
always have listening to do with the label, of course, because we're thinking,
I
I had
guess you must be crammed with email with bands they want to
oh, it's
collaborate.
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And for example, we have this artist he lives in Belgium, but he's originally from Tunisia. He sent his new album today, like finally finished, and it was great, and it was just fun to listen to it. And so yeah, I spent probably an hour or more a day, 2 hours just listening to stuff related to the label.
Nice. And we have a question for you. Have you made any future tour plans with the Frictions in the somewhat distant future? What's going on there? I remember that you guys were talking about a new album or something, right?
Well, we did an album last year. We toured in the Balkans a bit, and that was kind of it. I mean, we were thinking plans for actually June. We were talking in February, and then Corona hit, and so
wait a minute. You're telling me that you guys published a new album, and I hadn't heard it?
we published a new album. I think we recorded it a year ago. It must have come out, I don't know, July, or I don't know when it was.
Damn,
exactly.
I completely missed that one. I need to. Is it on Spotify?
It should be on Spotify. Yes.
Okay, I'll definitely.
I know
check it out
it's on
after this.
Bandcamp. It's on Bandcamp for sure.
Nice. So yeah, maybe I could ask you one more question. Is there any artists or author or whoever that you would die to meet and to have a conversation with?
It's funny because people are doing these lists. Like I don't know. I'm in some sub group of people on Facebook. They're making the list of like the most famous people they ever met. And I mean, I know people that know. I mean, I've met a couple of famous people, but some of these people really met some really amazingly famous people. And I was thinking like about that, like for me, the people that you know, always was most struck by were never really like super famous, actually. You know, it was, I don't know, like when I met the guitar player for the Gang of Four, Andy Gill. I mean, to me, this was like, you know, I think I would have been less nervous meeting Barack Obama, for sure. You know, like it would have been like, I could say, I was kind of cool. I met Barack Obama, but like meeting Andy Gill, I was just like, you know, I was nervous. I was, you know, I remember when I first met Townes Van Zandt, I could barely talk, you know, that kind of thing. So it's always, I think it's, you know, the people that actually, you know, like I would never want to meet Dylan. I mean, Dylan probably meant as much to me as a musician as anybody, but I don't know. What do you say to him? Like, hey man, I dig your stuff. It's fucking good. You know, you don't say anything to him, but you know, there's other people that you feel like you could maybe have a conversation and learn something from. And and I was pretty lucky in that regard. I met a lot of those people that really meant a lot to me, you know, on that level. Steve was one of them, you know. Meeting Steve for me was big. I mean, I remember I played in Ljubljana. I played with, it was about 2 weeks difference between playing in Hala Tivoli on stage with REM and then 2 weeks later in Kud Franz per Sharon with Miracle 3. And you can guess which one was a bigger deal to me.
Yeah.
You know, when I was backstage at Kud and Steve and Victor and Linda said to me, hey man, you should come up and play Days of Wine and Roses with us. I was just like, wow. You know, I was just so thrilled by that. You know, it was, yeah, it was wonderful when Peter Buck asked me to play with REM too. I mean, it was really cool, but it was more kind of surreal. And, you know, Peter Buck, who I didn't know then, if he had asked me in 1984 to come on stage with REM, I would have probably had a brain seizure, you know. Yeah. But at that point, I don't know, it just didn't mean, I wouldn't ever say it in a bad way, but it didn't mean so much to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't life-changing or something like that.
Yeah. In my case here, you know, my goal for this conversation is to reach out to Nick Cave and have a convo with him, like an easygoing chat.
Why not? Yeah, why not?
That would be interesting.
I did he's one of the famous people I did meet. I did meet Nick Cave, so a couple times.
How, like in which circumstance?
I was, very strangely, I was at I remembered it as his 40th birthday party, but it wasn't. He was a little bit, so it was 5. He must have been 38 or something. It was in London because it was when Walkabouts were signed to Virgin, and we were working with a guy named Victor Van Vogt. And Victor had been the engineer on Murder Ballads, for example, and The Good Son. So, you know, he knew Nick, and he had been the Bad Seeds live sound man for years also. So we were working in London, and Victor got this call like, hey, you know, it's my birthday tonight, come on down. And so Carla and I went with Victor to this party. I mean, Nick knew who we were because we had covered this song "Luma the Land" on a record called Unsatisfied Mind.
Yes.
And yeah, he was very gracious. He was really nice, actually. I mean, we didn't talk a long time, but you know, he came right up to Carla and I and stuck out his hand and said, "Hey, thanks for doing that nice cover of my song." It was like the first thing he said. So no, he was sweet. He was sweet.
Right. Super. I can't wait to meet him then.
No, I think these days probably he's even much sweeter. I mean, I met him also. Walkabouts opened for Bad Seeds outside of Vienna in 2005, I think, and we met everybody then again. I mean, and he was also very gracious backstage, and yeah, they were all, I mean, nice people, really nice people.
Yeah, like a humble human being, man.
Yeah,
that's the way to be.
He's the real deal. I mean, he's you know, he's
great, amazing. Man, I think we need to wrap it up here since we have another 5 minutes, and then the Instagram shut us off, basically, because it's only 1 hour top, and we're almost there. So thank you very much for this, man. It really made my day, really.
My pleasure. Thanks for the questions, and thanks for the other people that had questions, and it was a pleasure.
we're gonna meet again soon, I hope.
Well,
And
I hope it's very,
let's
I hope it's very soon. Yeah.
and let's keep it up, the idea of you with Fernando and Antonio, and do
Yeah, that
some
sounds
nice
fun.
noise here.
Sounds really fun.
All right, dude. Have a nice
Okay, take
evening.
care, Marco. Ciao.
Cheers,
Ciao.
Chris. Ciao.
Ciao.
And here we are, people. We're gonna meet again tomorrow at 6:15 p.m. with Peter Baros from Ljubljana. We're gonna have a nice talk about the Ljubljana cultural scene at the moment and his projects and whatever is going on there. It's been such a great pleasure to talk with Chris Eckman tonight. You can see all the conversation through our _music TS account. So it stays there for 24 hours, so you can rewatch it. We're gonna probably cut some little snippets and publish somewhere. So go follow our page, _music TS for more, and go follow us on Facebook. Yeah, we're here in Trieste. We're trying our best to navigate in this uncertain and unprecedented time, trying to spread out a message of communion, brotherhood, and love. So be safe, take care, don't freak out, and most importantly, stay yeah.